Merry meet, Annie here. Welcome back to the Flow of the Rite series. We have entered our ritual and made our act of abeyance. And now we're going to bless and cleanse the elemental symbols as we prepare to cast our circle. Does it seem like it's taken a lot to get to this point? I've lost track of how many videos are in this series. So as a sideline for a moment, it's taken me so much longer to describe any of these things. The coming back into your circle and taking up your mantle, honoring the altar, and making an act of abeyance. It's taken me so much longer to describe them than it actually takes to do them. We're talking just 2 or 3 minutes, maybe, according to what you decide to do or not to do of what I've described. Here's one of the things that happens, I think, that is interesting for a solitary practitioner. A lot of the things we're going to talk about in the next several videos. In the time, for instance, I've been with a traditional coven. A lot of it was not done by the coveners. It was done by the priest and priestess to the circle, by the maiden and the knight to the circle, who were in attendance and assisting. A lot of what we do as solitary practitioners, we take on the whole story, the whole creation, the entire effect. It's all on us. I think sometimes for the solitary practitioner, it seems like we're awful busy when we go about right. But for those who want something in a traditional flow, we have to go about taking upon things that would have been done by a priest or priestess, would have been done even before we entered circle. For instance, what I'm about to talk about often in my first experience of circle would have been done before coveners even arrived. That sanctifying and establishing and setting of the circle. You can probably pick up on that, because how many times do you read or see things about contemporary Wiccan ritual where there's some kind of a welcoming into circle, a greeting at the edge of circle. Perhaps the one that we often see where you may be questioned at the edge of the circle, how do you enter this circle? And you answer in perfect love and trust and in some way step in. Perhaps you were kissed and brought in, or spun and brought in, or step over, something like a particular stone or a besom or something that's been laid out, that feeling of stepping into. Well, the backstory to that is you're stepping into something because something had been created for you before you got there. So a lot of what we do as individual practitioners is everything that would have been done by everyone in a communal rite. I wanted to do that aside now because sometimes it seems like the housekeeping of circle seems like so many steps. From what I describe here, remember, what I describe can take just a couple of seconds to do. Also, we're opting to involve ourselves in the flow of a rite that connects us to those who are doing this and have done it in groups. It's all about us, my dears. We have to take on every responsibility to the circle. After we've made our act of abeyance, our next responsibility to the circle is the blessing and cleansing of the elements. These are the elemental symbols that are on our altars. In the world of our magics, those symbols are what calls the energies of those elements into our circle, like knows like. So the water that we hold at our chalice is not just the water in our chalice. It will, in a magical sense, call to our circle all the energies and power of the element of water. So we begin by acknowledging we have these mundane symbols of the elements and then intentionally turning them into, like flipping on a switch, to draw the energy of that element to that element. On our altars, those symbols will be the salt we use for earth, water, of course, used for water. For fire, we may use either a candle flame, or we can also use the ember of charcoal if we have lit that to use for our incense. And for air, we will use our incense as representative of the element in their earthly forms and about to be transformed into something in addition to that. Before I tell you how I bless and cleanse the elemental symbols, notice I use 2 different words. I use bless and I use cleanse. And that is because the projective elements of air and fire are blessed. The receptive elements of water and earth are cleansed. Now, you will decide in your rites whether you want to make this distinction, but because it's done in a lot of what you read and a lot of what you see that we do when we share parts of our rituals, I wanted to explain why, because this is an area I have received a lot of questions on. And that's around the fact that we don't feel the need to cleanse the projective elements of air and fire. But then we say we have to somehow cleanse water and earth as if something is wrong with them, that the receptive elements, because they are receptive, are somehow needing of being cleaned up before you can use them. It's not exactly that way, although I know that for many of you it has appeared that way, and therefore you're skipping over this aspect of traditional rite because it's nonsensical to you. Every element's perfect in its own way, isn't it? So why are we saying that we have to cleanse earth and water? It's the way we look at them magically, if we are aligned to the elements in this way. The power of air and fire are their ability to project. The power of, not the problem with, or something that's bad about, but the power of water and earth is seen as their being receptive. Equally as powerful as the projective, magical elements of fire and air. But in old school Wicca, definitely in this area stolen from ceremonial magic, when we bless the elements, we bless fire and air, and we cleanse water and earth. If you understand the difference, it makes sense. We want to get earth and water back to their pure state, unaffected by anything else. We're looking for that naked, raw essence of who they are. And from ceremonial magic perspective, we do cleanse them to prepare them for that. Now, the old school words were exorcising and banishing, and very heavy words about how to cleanse water and earth. And I'm not about that, never have been. Yeah, it was what was done in my first circles, but it had too much of that shading that they were somehow wrong in being receptive. I like a kinder, gentler form of cleansing them, to get them back to their most primitive state, uninfluenced by anything else. In other words, getting them to their pure essence. So remember, when I talk about how I bless and cleanse, I'm not cleansing because there's something wrong with. I'm bringing something back to its most powerful, primal state. You decide. Study the elements in depth, and including the classical interpretations of the elements, to decide if you even see them as projective and receptive. I hope that you do in the end, because we need at any given time when we work with the elements, no matter how small or great our work, to be totally receptive, or to be totally projective, or to be a mixture of that according to the need. And appreciating the power that comes from both extremes, to me, is an important part of working magic with the elements. I had made notes to myself that you see in books, and this is why so many of you had questions for me about this whole idea of exorcising the elements of water and earth. And I went through several books that I had, and I went back actually to my original rituals from a long, long time ago. And the words that we used, yeah, I know why you come up with the questions you come up with. And this is typical of what it was like. Take up the vessel of water. Hold your hand over it, or use a banishing pentagram over it. I exorcise thee, O creature of water, that thee cast out all the impurities and uncleanliness of the spirits of the world of phantasm, so they may harm me not. That's why so many of you were like, bull. I just can't go with that old school concept. Ceremonial magic and thinking we need to exorcise and banish so that the elements don't harm us. Yeah, that seems kind of an extreme to me too. But the concept of projective and receptive has remained equally as important to me. I now look upon that kind of phrasing as archaic. I simply don't use it because I don't feel it. It's not that way to me. We don't do anything in Rite that we don't know why we are doing it. So this is actually something for you to spend some time researching, learning about this concept of projective and receptive elemental powers, why they're important to you and within you. And think about then, as you're making an offering of these elements at the beginning of your circle casting, would you then treat them slightly differently, but equally respectful of their power? So here's the blessing of the elements that I use. I start with air, and I make an offering of it, holding it up in my hands. That would be the incense I'm going to use in circle. It's projective. I bless it. And the blessing is, creature of air, I bless you, that you will lend your energy to the power of my circle. I raise it up and I put it down. In the act of doing that, I'm quite aware of the fact that I am acknowledging the physical reality of the element of air. And then I move on to fire, also projective. And the blessing as I raise it is, creature of fire, I bless you, that you will lend your energy to the power of my circle. I raise it up and put it back down on my altar. Then I move on to water, the first of the two receptive elements, and I treat them differently. I offer up the water, and I say, creature of water, I cleanse you, that your energy will serve the power of this circle. Two shiftings in the phrasing. Instead of saying, I bless you, I said, I cleanse you. And instead of saying, lend your energy to the power of my circle, I say that your energy serve the power of my circle. Again, I say, spend time studying the power of the elements and how they are perceived in their receptive and projective aspects, and decide if a shift of phrasing is necessary for you. It is very necessary for me because I am acknowledging what I see as the power of water. Onto earth, the same thing, a receptive element. Creature of earth, I cleanse you, that your energy will serve the power of my circle. So after our abeyance, we have made the first offering of the elements, acknowledging the physical elements on our altar and preparing them to be the attractor of these spiritual, energetic, magical aspects of those very same elements. I've explained why to me it's done slightly different for air and fire as it is for water and earth, with roots going back, the ceremonial magic, and some of the concepts of the powers of the elements as projective and receptive, and the way we might address that at the very beginning of our ritual. Next video, we will be making an offering of those elements as our first casting. Until then, I wish you mirth and reverence. Merry part.